Good afternoon. I can't think of anybody whose life work better represents the kind of subjects that we're going to be talking about in this next panel than Marian Wright Edelman, so that it's, however coincidental that we wind up coming just after that presentation, it ideally sets the tone for what we're going to be talking about. My name is Paul Reville. I am the executive and founding director of the Harvard Graduate School of Education's Education Redesign Lab, and I'm a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and I'm delighted to be with you today. You are about to meet four extraordinary leaders. I don't think of them as bosses in the Tammany Hall sense of bosses as the title read for this session, but rather leaders, extraordinary mayors. We have three current mayors and one former mayor who is going to be commenting on the work of this initiative that we'll be describing today. These are leaders who have stepped out and said, doing what we need to do for the prosperity and long-term health of our communities goes beyond simply providing an adequate school system, but extends to making sure that each and every one of our children is successful. And so they have committed themselves to redefining the social compact with citizens, with children, and with their families, and building out systems of opportunity and support in an initiative that our Education Redesign Lab heads call By All Means. So it's a great privilege for me to welcome to the stage now Mayor Libby Schaaf of Oakland, California, Mayor Jorge Elorza of Providence, Rhode Island, Mayor, I think they're coming, so they're going to all appear at once, Mayor Kim Driscoll of Salem, Massachusetts, and former Washington, D.C. mayor and a long-term education reform leader and veteran, Adrian Fenty, who is now a partner in Macro Ventures and spans both worlds of this conference. I welcome our panelists to the stage. Okay, we're going to start quickly. My job is to just give a brief framing for the By All Means initiative, and then each of our mayors, our three mayors, are going to talk to you about what they've been doing in their respective cities, and then we're going to turn to Adrian and ask him to talk a little bit about his reflections, given his experience both as a mayor and having been heavily involved in education, and now in the world of Macro Ventures, where he works. The theme here starts in Massachusetts. I'm from Massachusetts. I used to be the Secretary of Education in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts, as you probably know, is the birthplace of public education. One of our most prominent education leaders was Horace Mann. Horace Mann had the proposition that education, above all things, would be the great balance wheel of society. That education would be the great equalizer, that if we had a common school that welcomed everyone, irrespective of gender or race or creed or income, and welcomed everyone into a school, gave them all a quality common school treatment, that in the end they'd go out and we'd have a meritocracy where effort and talent would rise to the top. That was a radical and important proposition in the mid-19th century. Today, to believe that that proposition is going to work in terms of equalizing opportunity and success in our society, I would submit to you as an exercise in magical thinking. So when I left my role in government in Massachusetts, we were the leading state in the country. We had all kinds of education statistics based on averages that would show you that we were number one in the country, number one in the world on a number of different kinds of indicators. But yet we still had deep, persistent achievement gaps. In spite of an incredible investment in education reform, lots of money, lots of hard work, lots of progress, but we still had an iron law correlation between socioeconomic status and educational achievement and attainment. So it seemed like an opportune time to step back and think a little bit about where we need to go in the 21st century beyond simply tinkering with the system that we'd inherited from the 19th century. So we set about doing that by opening a conversation about poverty, not in a deficit model kind of way, not in a stereotyping way, but to say this iron law correlation between socioeconomic status and educational achievement and attainment undeniably exists, The system as we currently know it, schooling as we currently know it, is clearly too weak an intervention to overcome poverty on average. Doesn't predict anything for any individual, but on average, your demographics are a pretty good predictor of your educational attainment and achievement. So if we were going to design a system that was really about educating all children to a high level, giving all children an opportunity to be successful, what would that design look like? And we posited 3 principles for the design of that. We said it ought to be personalized. It ought to meet every child where he or she is in early childhood and give them what they need inside and outside of school in order to be successful. Secondly, it ought to attack those impediments, those obstacles in the lives of children that get in the way of them coming to school in the first place and being present and open and ready to learn when they got there. Thirdly, we needed to level the playing field with respect to out-of-school learning opportunities. Children in the K-12 system as currently constructed, conventional public schools, spend less than 20% of their waking hours in school. The other 80% is outside of school. Affluent parents provide virtually continuous round-the-clock enhancements to their education. Other children have next to nothing. So if we want to get to all means all, we're going to have to level that playing field. So we built an organization to help start a national conversation about this topic, to craft a new, much broader, much bolder vision about what education ought to be about. And that's the Education Redesign Lab. We work through advocacy, research, field work, and field building. In that field work that we do, we created an initiative where we scoured the country and looked for 6 leaders in mayors, because we saw this as a job that was too big for schools alone. Schools alone cannot get us to all means all. It would take whole communities. So we looked for 6 mayors who looked beyond simply providing an adequate education, and we found 6 mayors, 3 of whom are joining us on the stage today to participate in an initiative called By All Means, where they convene children's cabinets and work on some of those principles and those issues that I discussed. The 6 cities are represented here: Oakland, California; Louisville, Kentucky; Providence, Rhode Island; and 3 cities in Massachusetts: Salem, represented in our group today; Somerville, and the city of Newton. And together, these mayors, their children's cabinets, our colleagues at Harvard and around the country, a number of partners, are working together, committing leadership, committing resources, developing plans, putting together indicators of progress, increasing access that children have to various services and supports, building out systems of support and opportunity to make it possible for all of our children to be successful in school. So that's what the work is all about. I realize this is a technological audience, so one of the challenges I give you in listening to our presenters today is to listen to this in terms of what you think are the technological applications that would apply to helping these mayors and their colleagues in the cities address the challenges they describe and be part of the solution that is going to render an equal platform on which all of our children can achieve at high levels. So with that, we're going to turn it over to each of our 3 participating mayors to describe what they've been up to, and then we'll have some conversation about it. Libby, you're first up.
Great. Thanks. In Oakland, California, we want to disrupt poverty. We lie on the edge of Silicon Valley, amazing job opportunities, some of the best educational institutions of higher learning, Stanford, UC Berkeley. And yet, of my 9th grade class, only 10% of them will have a college degree by the time they are 23 years old. What a waste of human potential. And so our main initiative that is part of the By All Means program is the Oakland Promise. And this is not your daddy's promise program, okay? This is a lot bigger and more comprehensive. It is literally a cradle-to-career initiative that we know in 10 years will triple the number of Oakland public school students, whether they graduate from a district or charter-run public school, that will actually have a college degree and be prepared for career success. We start with babies babies born into poverty and give them a $500 college savings account, as well as financial coaching for the parents and immediate financial assistance. Then in kindergarten, we give every child, regardless of income, a $100 scholarship. We also work with teachers, parents, community, and principals to build a college-going culture. I heard our last panel talk a lot about the importance of culture. That is true for schools as well. We also use, we're going to talk about technology a little bit, behavioral nudges. These scholarship awards are tied with behavioral nudges that remind families and students what they need to be college ready at that moment in time. We deposit into this scholarship over time during different academic milestones, and by the time the students graduate, they have $4,000 for college. In middle schools and high schools, and this is the initiative that we're really focused on with Harvard, we have future centers. And these are actual resource centers, professionally staffed, that are college and career access hubs, where we bridge the information gap, where we provide families access to technology, and we really educate students about what it takes to get into college as well as to pay for college. And what are the career opportunities and what type of education does it take to become eligible for those career opportunities. And then finally, we provide multi-year college scholarships, but more importantly, persistent support. We know that of our low-income students that go to college, only 20% are finishing. That's a national statistic. We provide our students with a one-on-one mentor, peer support groups, counseling, and regular retreats so that we give them the social and emotional support, not just to get into college, but to finish college. That's the overview of the Oakland Promise. It is supported by our Children's Cabinet. We have an actual formal joint powers authority, as well as something that we call the Oakland Thrives Leadership Council. And I will say that having a big, bold initiative like the Promise is something that has really galvanized and created partnerships where we never imagined them to be. With our local healthcare providers, with our county government, with our school system, it really has been an amazing experience of how an entire community can rally around a vision where we are not going to leave any child behind.
Thank you, Libby. Appreciate that. Okay, Jorge, it's to you.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. So in Providence, we've used the By All Means initiative to launch our own All-In Education Summit and All-In Education Initiative. And what that means to us is, as well, a full cradle-to-career initiative where we think very purposefully about the kinds of interventions and resources that our young people and families have throughout their entire educational career, and then even afterwards, because we feel that our responsibility to them extends even after high school graduation. And so the By All Means initiative has provided an organizing framework around the work that we're doing to complement some of the existing work that we have. So for example, for the cradle part of the initiative, we have the Providence Talks program, and the Providence Talks program is the only program of its kind at scale in the country that's working very focused, in a very focused way on addressing the 30 million word gap. And this is all based on the principle that a parent is a child's first and most important teacher. And how do we build up that agency and that sense of, agency so that parents can take ownership over their child's education? So we want to make sure that our children are ready for kindergarten by the time they begin. And there are a number of initiatives that we have where we're investing in our children, the whole child, inside of the classroom, and very importantly, outside of the classroom as well. But what we've also come to realize is that while there's a lot that we can do as a school department and as a city, there's only so much that we can do. And if all truly does mean all, and we want to reach every single child, then we need our partners and we need our stakeholders in the community. And so about a month and a half ago, we had a huge community gathering, a community summit. We had about 500 people who gave up their entire Saturday to spend the day talking about education and helping us think of ways of how they can be more engaged and how we can provide these new avenues of engagement for the community in the schools. And it comes at a very interesting time for us in our city, but I think also within the national context, that you have a number of people that just want to help. They want to contribute, they want to volunteer, they don't know exactly how to get involved. And we want to take advantage of this while at the same time making sure that our students have the resources, the attention, and the supports that they need so that they can achieve their potential.
Thank you, Jorge. Kim, tell us about Salem.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation and for all the work that we're doing collectively. It's great to hear Libby and Jorge's work so far. Salem, pretty diverse community, 14 miles north of Boston, teach in 33 different languages, have really struggled with our public school setting around challenges of closing the achievement gap. Kids like mine, 2 parents, college educated, do quite well in our schools, but too few of our students are really achieving the type of success we know they're capable of. With our By All Means initiative, we're really looking to marry the wonderful array of community assets that we have within our school district. We are fortunate that for a small city, and the cohorts that are part of this initiative are small and large, and it's amazing, regardless of the size, we all kind of suffer with some of the same challenges, just in different scales. In our community, we've got this rich array of resources, museums, a National Park Service site, a university, a world-class hospital. We punch out of our weight class for our size, but we hadn't figured out how to bridge those terrific organizations and bring them into our schools to help with the resource needs that we have there. By forming our version of a children's cabinet, we had key stakeholders, CEOs from all of these groups around the table, and really helped fostering an environment where education is a community mission. It's not just the school district's job or the city's job to educate our public students, it's our community's job. Working through those efforts, we were able to align some of the needs with these rich array of partners that we have. Having a world-class museum who wants to be helpful, but not being able to speak the same language about what's happening in the academic world in our community was holding us back. We had an opportunity to work with these partners, but this By All Means initiative made it a much more meaningful conversation that's focused on how do we braid together the services we need within our schools, because that's the touch point. Really hardworking teachers who know the 20 kids in their classroom or 25 kids in their classroom, know their needs, but don't necessarily know how to connect it to the resources that exist in our community. And lots of really talented, hardworking community partners who do things very well, but don't necessarily know how to navigate our school system. So through our By All Means initiative, we're working with a partnership called City Connects, born out of Boston Public Schools, that braids together resources within the classroom setting and connects those rich array of partners for social, emotional, developmental support. One of the best things that we're excited about, or one of the best, I would say, attributes of this program is it's not just for the needy kids. Sure, we have kids who have food insecurities, who need coats in winter, who suffer with not having the type of supportive parental environment at home. But we also have kids from very affluent parents who are on an autism spectrum, or have eating disorders, or have an array of needs that exist regardless of your income or their family's income. This program is designed to make sure we're helping every single student. It starts this September in a K-8 model where our teachers will serve with our adjustment counselors through our City Connects program to better understand each child. We just shouldn't know what every third grader's reading level is. We should have a better understanding of what their needs are. Whether they need recreational basketball, they're a great program, someone to help with their social inclusion, or a coat in winter. Having a program like City Connects allows our teachers and our outside partners really rich array of youth service organizations to museums, hospitals, and park service sites, bridging that gap and providing our students and our families a level of support that would be unparalleled to what they're used to now. If you're a teacher trying to help a student, you hope you know about that program. If you're a family in need, maybe you have access to that help. We're going to break down that barrier, make it easier for everybody to navigate without a stigma, without any attention to who you are or where you came from, and putting those things together we hope is going to improve student outcomes. We know City Connects works. They're a proven model. They're in over 70 school districts throughout the country. We've seen increased test scores, opportunities for students to cut down on absenteeism, higher high school graduation rates. So we're really looking forward to measuring this. This is not just a wraparound service model that we hope will work well. We're really partnering in a way where we can track this data and put our students, all of our students, on a trajectory for success.
Thank you very much, Kim. Adrian, you've got both the muscles and the scars of a mayor who took education seriously and invested a lot of leadership in it. Some people think, well, you can't really change these systems of education. They're too hidebound and it's not possible. You've just heard from 3 mayors who are at work trying to do that. I'm curious about your reflections and what you think about what you've heard.
Well, first, I want to thank you and the team at Harvard for putting this together. And not just for putting a program together, but inviting mayors to be at the head of it. And I'll tell you why, because education is a tough one for mayors. You know, mayors are kind of impatient and used to getting things done. And neither one of those two things is commonplace in most urban school systems. And so what, you know, the perspective of a mayor, and I remember 10 years ago when we were, 10 years ago to the month when I was about to take over the DC school system, here's the thought, the mayor, a parent comes up to you, and just like Mayor Schaaf says, it's 23% of the kids in Oakland are going on to college and to graduate. Well, you know, the same type of statistics exist with reading grade levels, math grade levels, dropout rates, graduation rates. And so you envision yourself as this parent and you're like, well, what is my answer to this person? How can I literally be in charge of a city that has these types of problems? But in every urban sector in this entire country, the United States of America, that is exactly what exists right now. Mm-hmm. Those are the statistics everywhere, San Francisco, LA, New York, Chicago. And so the question is, when you sit in a mayor's chair is, well, when is it going to change? Because we should have 100% of our kids, you know, going on to college. Because if you're a parent, if you have 3 kids, you would certainly think that all 3 of them are going to go to college. So why would you have a different set of standards for the kids and parents in your system? And so mayors come with a certain amount of impatience that I think is going to reach some great results. So I remember when we approached Michael Bloomberg, who had just taken over the New York City system, about what to do, and he explained it as you can't have like 9 people in charge, and what he meant was you can't have a school board in charge, you need to have the mayor in charge of the school system. And again, what I always told people was Bloomberg and Richard Daley before him in Chicago, they already had enough power. They weren't looking for more power. What they were looking for was accountability. And here's the issue. So you are exploring some tremendous issues about wraparound services. And I'll just close with what Michelle Rhee used to tell people. And she said, in the very first cabinet meeting I had, when we had taken over the school system, I literally appointed her as the chancellor of the DC school system June 12, 2007, so it's almost 10 years to the day. So I told everyone in the cabinet, human resources, health, child welfare, prison system, you name it, police department, fire department, I said, listen, whatever she says, she gets. I said it exactly like that, and I didn't hesitate. Because I was a city council member before, I was tired of people from the school system walking around complaining, you know what I mean, that they didn't have the resources of the government. So I think what you guys are going to put together is a framework of what we looked at and what Bloomberg and what Daley looked at is, yes, you have to have these wraparound services in order to, you know, fix all the problems in a city and achieve the results that the parents want. But there has to be some accountability also. Right. And that's why, as I said in the beginning, I'm glad that because you could have had anybody from the city, president of the school board, right, whomever, come and be part of this. I'm really glad that you got mayors involved. I think it's going to yield some great results.
Well, thank you. It did seem to us that it was a much bigger job than we had any right to put on superintendents by themselves, because we were asking for sort of lifelong outcomes with a relatively weak intervention. But I wonder, just one follow-up with you on this, Adrian. So much of this is about, I mean, embedded in the work that you heard the 3 mayors talk about is a reconceptualization of what the community needs to do for its children that goes beyond just 6 hours a day, 180 days a year, cradle to career, that kind of language. Do you think the public will exists for that? And if not, what are the ways in which you could generate public will for a conception of education that's broader and deeper and much more likely to be effective than the relatively simplistic idea that we currently have?
Yeah, well, just like any broken organization, in order to take it from quote unquote broken and to being what you expect out of it, some very difficult decisions are going to have to be made. So I'd say the public will exist. Like if you walk around and tell people the school system is broken and needs to change, 100% of the people are going to agree with you, 100%. The problem is when you start making the 3 or 4 toughest changes that need to be made, and then the special interests come out of the woodwork, then that's when you really need people to have some fortitude. And not just the elected officials, because they obviously have it, but the people in the community, because it gets very hairy and confusing, and it's drawn upon all kind of geographic and even racial lines, to be honest with you.
Right.
So I think that's where the community needs to have fortitude. So I say, yes, they want to have change, 100%. Does the community have the fortitude or the stomach, do you know what I mean, to deal with it when it happens?
That's
I think we've got to work on that. We've got to work on our mental, on our stomach.
And the case that we make for this kind of work.
Was that?
And the case that we make for this kind of work.
Yeah, there are probably, there's probably a brilliant way to put it before the people, but it hasn't been discovered yet. And for now, people it comes out a little bit controversial.
Yeah. Let me, this is a technology conference, a lot of technology leaders here. Some are developing products just simply to, quite frankly, navigate around the system. Others developing products that could easily be embedded in the system and could be of service in broadening the scope of what the system does. So I'm wondering among our mayors how you react to some of the things that you've heard here, how you think technology could be harnessed in service of meeting the challenges that you describe in your respective communities.
Do you want me to start?
Go ahead, Libby.
Sure, the Californian. So, I mentioned this before, that the issue of behavioral nudges, we don't want to just have a scholarship fund sitting out there. We want to use it as a communication tool, but we need technology to enable that communication, that behavioral nudge, to remind families what they should be doing to make their child college ready. We also are going to need to really use data. If we want to make sure that a child is on track from day one for success, we're going to have to be monitoring who's doing what along the way. That's a huge unmet potential. Finally, if we're sending hundreds of mentors off to mentor both pre and during college students, that would not happen without technology, especially the way young people communicate today. And then finally, in our future centers, we're finding that technology access is a big need. So not only do we have computers and technology there, but we're also linking families up with home resources. They're getting high-speed internet connections through special deals that we have. They're getting access to home computers. That's huge. But my favorite role that technology can play is recognizing that you don't have a skilled workforce that is ready to fill all the jobs that you have. And so we've been very pleased to have people like Mark Benioff and Salesforce as our very first investors in this vision, because he realizes that his company will not succeed if he isn't nurturing his future workforce, which is coming out of our schools, and recognizing also that tech lacks diversity. Let's just be honest about that. And I have a very diverse student body in Oakland that is hungry for these opportunities, and a lot of tech leaders recognize that there's a great potential there.
I'm glad you made the argument, of the economic argument, because to me, I think that's at the base partly of the case that needs to be made for this, that though most of us come to events like this and professions like ours out of a moral conviction that this is just the right thing to do for children, and we're committed to that sense of equity in society, even if you don't come from that place, it's hard to envision a future for our democracy and our society where we have a student population nationally that's more than half low-income youngsters, more than half students of color, groups with which we've historically not been very successful. They're the new majority. If we don't educate them, it's virtually impossible to grow the economy, and we'll simultaneously be growing an underclass that becomes more and more expensive for the rest of us to carry. So it's an imperative, and we got to get after it. Jorge, what do you think on the technological implications?
As much as Mayor Fenty mentioned, as much as we hear from others, don't touch education. Education is a third rail. And even if you're wildly successful, you're not going to see the benefits until 10, 15 years, long after you're out of office. And so nonetheless, we're here, and we've made education our issue. And we recognize that if all truly does mean all, we need to tap into all of the technologies that exist to help us reach every individual. So there are a few things that come to mind in terms of the power of technology. We talk a great deal about how to personalize learning. And I think that as mayors go, I think we're all there. And at the superintendent level and beyond, we all recognize that individualized, personalized learning is the future. And we're all waiting for that micro-credentialing, that badging technology to take hold. And so, I really do think that once that comes, we can move to true mastery-based learning and maybe start to disrupt or completely deconstruct this K through 12 grade model. So that's exciting. We all believe that's the way of the future. We're just waiting for the technology to enable it. Second thing that comes to mind is we also recognize that it's not just about the context, the content. It's also about social and emotional learning. And I've heard of many creative ways to measure a child's development along social and emotional learning scales. And so I'm certainly waiting to see that be even more fully developed. And that's ready to be incorporated. We're ready to go on that. The last piece is, oftentimes the way that, the folks who are at the table making education policy decisions are folks like us, who I assume most of us did fairly well in the formal education system. And we leave out the voices of those folks who didn't do so well. And in a number of convenings that we've brought together recently, it's so interesting how you hear people report out on the issues that they most care about, but then you have either students or parents, and the issues that they bring up are completely different, and we would have never caught it had they not been at the table. And so what I would love to see is this technology that enables even further, deeper, and more genuine engagement from the surrounding community, so that it informs the policies that we're adopting. I know that technology can do this, and I know it can unlock a great deal of potential that we have, but we're all sort of still sitting on edge and seeing what that technology will be.
You made a point, and I do think we're kind of in the middle of a conversation nationally about education reform now. And since there's a lot of pushback on testing and on standards and on different kinds of schools and choice and all the rest of it, there's an opportunity to put goals that have to do with social and emotional development, that have to do with children's well-being, into the equation here, the accountability equation that Adrian mentioned earlier. And that's part and parcel of what you're saying, is we need to be more broadly accountable for the health and well-being and prosperity of our children. And I don't know that we're ready to take advantage of that moment in the policy discussion that's open right now, but technology could certainly be a tool and help in that. Kim, what about your take on technology?
Two quick thoughts, and just to pick up, I think if you think about what we're all trying to do, we're trying to bring a little bit of Finland to our communities when it comes to how we think about our educational system. And as a smaller district, I would say to you that our biggest challenge is still poverty. Access to technology still has to do more with poverty than our ability to provide a Chromebook or an iPad for everybody within our school district. The second piece of that, I would say, is having a workforce that primarily is over the age of 35, that doesn't move as quickly when you think about your entire teaching profession, hugely overworked, lots of pressure. I mean, we're in turnaround mode. We are talking about education all the time in our community. We are chasing what's the best way for us to make sure our kids aren't left behind. And having an educated workforce of teachers and administrators who understand these technology platforms and can wade their way through what are the best ones that work for us, the right time at the right place, that also we have the resources to fund. I think that's really, really tricky. That's putting a lot on people who are already super overtaxed in terms of their time, and more opportunities for us to have those individuals understanding how technology can support their work is critical. I think there's just a big divide from the teacher in front of the classroom who's terrific, hardworking, accountable, cares about kids, knowing the things that all the folks in this room are working on, and how that could not only inform their practice, but help help them learn and feel comfortable with that technology. And if we don't figure that piece out, the pace is just going to continue to outrun our ability to keep up with it.
Adrian, I want to ask you a financial question, but again, sort of embedded in the concept here is the idea that what we need to do for all children is what middle class, upper middle class families routinely do for their own in terms of providing systems of support and opportunity that wrap around them from prenatal time all the way till, as far as I can see, they're in their 20s and 30s. So the first question that invariably comes up when we introduce this topic is, well, doesn't that automatically mean lots more money? And some people will say, well, it means better spending existing money, but other people will say, well, we've got to face up to the fact that if you need more support, if you need more opportunities, some kids get it naturally at home, others don't, we're going to have to spend more. I wonder how you come down on that and what you think the political implications of that are.
Yeah, so two anecdotes, right? So education advocates fall into the same trap that most advocates before government fall into. It's the strangest thing. Like, people would always come to me and say, are you going to increase funding for, say, the Department of Parks and Recreation? It's such an anti-private sector thing. Like, you would never ask somebody in the private sector, are you going to spend more on something? You'd always ask them, are you going to get more results? Are you going to be more productive? Mm-hmm. And but if you look at any government in the country, state, local, or federal, that's how we judge. It's like, oh, yes, they must be doing a better job because they're spending more money on it. It's the craziest thing. And I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he ran Chicago school system after Arnie Duncan. Someone here knows his name. Ron, but I was on a panel with him. I think it was at this panel 4 years ago, and he said, you know what? I would trade probably a couple $100 million of my budget in order to have more autonomy. Because what he found was that, and this is to your point, if you're a middle class, upper class family spends way more than 9 to 3 with their kid. They go 9 to 3, and then they're probably going till 8 o'clock, and they're probably doing something in the morning. But try to extend the school day. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're in charge of a school system, or you're one of these 3 mayors, there's so many rules, union and otherwise, that prevent you from doing so. And so what happens is the lower income kids, after they go home, if their parents are working all night, they don't have that same and you could do it in a school system. So I do want to say something about the technology, and I speak as someone who was out in DC and now and work in Silicon Valley. I used to think that technology was the big word in Silicon Valley, but there's 3 other big words. One of them is innovation. It's just innovation by any means. You're trying something new. The second is disruption. You know what I mean? An old legacy system needs to be disrupted. Right? I mean, you see it in everything in Silicon Valley. It's why Netflix and LinkedIn and everything exists. But the third one that I never really appreciated until I started working out there is failure. Failure is as common a theme in Silicon Valley as you'll ever find. And the reason is, if you're not willing to fail, if you're not willing to try something new, then you're not ever really going to make any dramatic change. And that's why I appreciate that you're founded and in charge of the Education Redesign Lab, because I think it's got to be redesigned, right? I mean, the school building, as Davis pointed out in Waiting for Superman, looks exactly like it did 100 years ago. Nothing has changed.
That's right.
Nothing. I mean, that's ridiculous. So we got to be willing to fail and innovate and disrupt.
Right. I want to ask a question about governance with respect to this. And so we're in an era of changing governance. We had the ESSA federal legislation passed. We have a new administration in Washington. A lot more responsibility being pushed back to the states. This is a municipal initiative that we're describing. I wonder what each of you would say with respect to colleagues at the state level or those at the federal government level relative to what kind of help and support you would need for them as you do what we described earlier, fundamentally kind of redefining the social compact at a local level, but still needing to be interconnected at those other 2 levels.
Yeah. So I would say for us, Having state and federal officials who are more of a partner and less of an auditor so that we can move forward with innovation, with allowing failure. I would say having a healthy ecosystem means we can't have kids fearful about immigration status and not having family members here. Lots of blended family in our community. And I would say incentives work better than sticks, so creating incentives for us to have best practices, change those poor practices, put kids first is a lot better than a regulation or a crack over the head if you don't.
Okay, thanks.
So the first thing that comes to mind is the race to the top model. So there's a prize, and we're all competing for it. We in Rhode Island at the state level, we were successful several years ago, and we were able to get the resources. But even had we not received the federal resources, there are a number of reforms that enabled at the state level. And so, I would certainly encourage those kinds of nudges and that prize aspect. In terms of the federal government, what I would certainly ask for is more flexibility. We are laboratories of experimentation. Some things will work, some things won't work, but let us experiment. Let us try new things. And I would also, perhaps this isn't a policy change, but perhaps a change in terms of mentality. In terms of a Department of Education, I would think of it more of as a Department of School Supports or Department of Student Supports. And I think that'll go a long way to helping us be partners so that we can work together.
I think people are recognizing that cities are where the innovation is at. I like to say that as mayors, we really don't have time or patience for the partisan gridlock that is going on at other layers of government. We all belong to the party of get shit done, right? Agreed? So, support us. Support us in trying things out. If you could transform educational outcomes for every child in the city of Oakland, that is revolutionary. If you support me in proving that, I promise you that we will change the way that we spend the public dollar, because the return on investment is massive. And so I know that, I will not get too political, but in Oakland, California, people are not very excited about the changes in the national government. And this idea that they can make this tangible change where they live with their children is really inspirational. And so to support these initiatives that have a lot of local energy around them and recognize that they really are the blueprints, they really are the pilots for monumental change that will happen everywhere.
Well, and I do think at some level it's consistent with a new kind of federalism to say to us in our local communities, it's up to us now to rewrite this social compact and to redefine what we as communities want to do for our children. And what we want to do for our children is not only in the children's interest, but in our community's interest, and the way in which we preserve and develop an economy as a democracy. Any closing words of advice, Adrian, for your colleagues here who are still in the trenches?
Yes, I would just, not for them, but I would say to the communities out there, like sometimes school boards are part of the problem, and that's why I did away with mine. So I would say, one, make sure your school board hires somebody great, and then two, make sure your school board doesn't micromanage that person, because everyone cares about education. But no other agency is run by a group of people. The police department, fire department, all run by people who know what they're doing, and you allow them to do their job.
Good closing thought. Well, I want to thank you, Adrian, for joining us and bringing your expertise to the conversation. I want to thank our three mayors for your outstanding leadership and willingness to be here and share with the audience. Thank all of you for your continuing interest. I can think of no more important work in America than what we've just described. Thanks very much for being here.